analysis of the newspaper stories this morning inside of Freshly Pressed 981. And it's from Smooth 98.1, Smooth Breakfast with Ayo.
And Valentine.
And time for us to go into the details of the stories. Joining us to do analysis to these stories are Deveo Okorie. Deveo, good morning.
Good morning, Lagos.
Good.
Cool, inconclusive.
And also Adedunmade. Good morning, Adedunmade.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. Here's how you can send your comments, Lagos.
You can send to WhatsApp on 0809 444 0981. You can also send us a tweet on Smooth981FM or at Smooth981FM and use the hashtag FreshlyPress981. We're also streaming live on YouTube. If you'd like to join us there, we'll take comments from there as well.
And Lagos, we will start with a story from the Punch newspaper. Boko Haram in disarray, fighters stranded, and it's a statement from the multinational joint task force in Chad. They've been fighting Boko Haram. They claim that the leaders of Boko Haram are currently overwhelmed and the terrorist group is in disarray, according to News Agency of Nigeria reports. Deveo, your take on this story, seeing that this battle has been raging in different parts of Africa, not just Nigeria, but let's look at the stride so far.
Well, this is a report coming from the Multinational Joint Task Force, which currently is located in Chad. And the Chad armed leader, that's Colonel Timothy Antiga, made a statement. And basically he spoke to the obliteration of the Boko Haram capacity in some of those regions. And the reason he gave was that there's been a squeeze on their attacks, have brought a squeeze on their food, their drugs, that's their medical aid, as well as their ammunition, their weapons. And obviously in any location of conflict, wherever you put a hold or a squeeze on these said items, you're going to get some measure of impact. Now, how they were able to do this, he explained that there was day to night human intelligence. And this is meaning that people were able to give information as to locations, whereabouts, movements,
yes,
which you've always said that the army, the military cannot succeed without the collaboration of citizens and well-meaning individuals who, because these people live among us,
yes,
right? And then he also mentioned that they intensified air interdictions, which is almost like an air invasion on many of their operational bases, their fuel dumps, where they had weapons and ammunitions in Tumbun, Guinea, Abadam, Arege, Tumbun, Rego, and Dagaya. That was between March 7th and March 11th. Now, he also informed us that this had brought about some pandemonium among that faction of Boko Haram operating towards the north east, and that ISWAP, which has been linked to Boko Haram, sacked their factional chief, that was Abu Musab al-Banawi. He was replaced with Abu Umar Banawi. So there's been a change in leadership in that side. But they expect to maintain this to ensure that they, as always, mitigate their presence and bring to zero, hopefully, in the nearest future, the operations of this terrorist group. Now, in as much as we commend the army, I think we take their announcements also with a breath of understanding, in the sense that let us see in the coming months if the peace or some form of stability that they have gained with what he has reported is sustained.
yes,
Because we do know that with time across the past 6 years, whenever the military goes heavy on them, they scatter and then they regroup and come back. So let's hope that this, and as always, even on the Nigeria side, we need to step up our intelligence.
yes,
This
because
battle,
that is very important.
yes,
yes,
this battle cannot be won. In this second phase, when they did make a claim, the federal government, that Boko was technically defeated, we went into the second phase, which was more of an asymmetrical warfare, where in cases where the military doesn't have such capacities, like the suicidal bombing, using of soft targets, etc., it's very difficult to detect that when someone has the temerity to use their child or their daughters to be able to carry out such actions. It's very difficult, but hopefully We take this good news and we hope to hear more.
All right. Thank you, Deveo. Let's move on to the next story from the Daily Times. This one says Osibanjo heads federal government's policies implementation committee as Kyari Emefiele make list. That's Abba Kyari, and the head of CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the constitution of the Policies, Programs, and Projects Audit Committee to be headed by the Vice President, Yemi Osibanjo. He also named the Chief of Staff, Abba Kyari, head of Civil Service of the Federation, Minister of Budget, Minister of Finance, the Governor of the Central Bank as members, and also includes the Permanent Secretary General Offices, General Services Office, and some other ministers are named on this list. Adedunmade, please take us through the details of this story and their necessary functions, because we hear that they want to use this as a means to consolidate the president's plan, the plan of the administration going forward, and might inform the formation of the cabinet. Your thoughts?
Well, yes, I believe that now that the presidency, as it is true with the elections, I think now they're trying to have a better plan going forward. So that's why they inaugurated this committee, whose major role is to audit and determine the status of implementation of policies, programs, and projects, either those that have been inherited or those that have been started by the government. Then also to prepare a detailed working plan that will guide the incoming cabinet members on the direction of the government. So, yeah, this is just a way of doing a systematic review of all that has happened in the presidency and in their administration in the past 4 years, and it's going to include things like reviewing the end power, reviewing the trade of money, reviewing even the executive orders that were signed by the president, and most especially the ARGP, which was created to stabilize the economy, achieve food security. They introduced the VADs. They are also planning on improving transportation, and drive industrialization, including provide for sufficiency of our power systems in Nigeria. Now, there are a lot of challenges that they're going to face when they are planning now. Some of them may include FDI flow. Of course, we know that we've not had as much FDI as
That's
we would
foreign
have
direct
hoped for.
investment.
Yes, as we would have hoped for recently. Another thing is the rule of law. Sadly, this administration has not been known particularly for adhering to that, and also being strict compliance with the rules of procedure, especially as regards to the law. Now, there's also the issue of local and international acceptance of the presidency and its style of governance generally. I think that's going to play a big role. Then there's a need for us to manage the perception of our leaders, especially on that level, because the international community is keeping a close eye on Nigeria, and when our leaders do things, these things are interpreted to mean whatever the people that interpret them think they are. So trying to manage that perception, especially globally, is very important for the government at this time, because if we remember, there's been a couple of news reports, especially from international papers, which do not really encourage the economic plans of the Nigerian government at this time. Yes, so then there's also the fight against corruption, and most importantly, there are a number of bills that the president is yet to sign, especially the KAMA, the suppression of privacy bill, the tourism bill, the electronic transactions bill. Now, these are bills that, of course, when they're introduced, will also go a long way in boosting our economy. So all these are issues that I think this committee will actually be looking at, and it's good to see that they have quite a number of people, even in the public and private sector, involved. I hope that at least they come out with some good results.
Exactly. Although I have a question though, Adedunmade, seeing that there's no mention mention of how long, or the tenure of this committee, how long they have to carry out their functions. This question is born from the thought of, we know that the CBN governor, his tenure expires in June. Looking beyond, perhaps if this committee's functions actually go beyond that time, will the CBN governor still be playing his role as in the committee?
Well, the CBN governor might have to leave at that time, and someone might be introduced to take his position. Now, you understand that it is not attached to the man, but it's attached to the
Office.
office.
All right.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Right. So one other question. This was a news that came up earlier on, well, earlier this week. But it talked about you mentioned the ease of doing business and
Yeah.
how it applied to this committee. A firm had mentioned that that wasn't enough to attract FDI in Nigeria because there are other things that were still important. So with regards to improvement in the business environment, so we're congratulating the fact that the government has been, acting big on the ease of doing business, and we've ranked quite well. But the concerns about around other areas in the business environment, what's your take on that one?
Yes, for instance, there is double taxation, and that
Right.
We're going to be
continues
talking
to
about
be
that later.
yeah, that
actually.
continues to be a major problem in Nigeria at this time.
Mm.
Yes, and infrastructure, power,
Mhm.
all these things play a big role.
And investor apathy. Let's look at the story from Premium Times. Alleged 2.5 billion naira fraud. Court orders NBC boss to appear even on stretcher. And that is how the headline is framed here on Premium Times. The Federal High Court in Abuja has ordered the Director General of the National Broadcasting Commission, Isha Kawu, to appear before it in April, regardless of his health status. And we'll recall that there was a statement that was released by the Commission's spokesperson, Rashida Kudwa, and in that, the lawyers of Mr. Kau said that the defendant was on admission following recent medical challenges from a surgery he underwent a decade ago, and that informed his failure to appear in court. But then we see the judge's statements. But let's look through this story and the allegations that are preferred against him by the ICPC.
Yes, just like you said, he's being prosecuted by the ICPC for diverting 2.5 billion naira, which was meant for our digital switch. We've said in Nigeria that we wanted to do it in 2012, 2015, and 2017, all deadlines of which we have lost or we have failed to meet, and we're still on it. So there's this 2.5 billion that he and this private firm are being charged with siphoning. And it's very important because, of course, we all know what Nigeria stands to gain when the switch is fully operational. For instance, according to Lai Mohammed, we stand to gain about $1 billion annually. Even the film industry might gain about $250 million annually. And it's also going to be a great thing for content creators at that time. But this also speaks to the issue of our criminal trials in Nigeria. I've always said that things only happen for the best when it involves the politicians. That's why we have election petitions that must end in 180 days, no matter what happens in that tribunal. So I also believe that there should be a set limit to all kinds of cases, not just election petitions, but also criminal trials as well, because we can see that they can go for as long as 10 years, 15 years, and is that really justice at the end of the day? So yes, we will have to review that very importantly, and I think that is, like I said, there should be a stated time. For instance, maybe a criminal trial should not be more than 360 days at the maximum. At least if that were the case, then we'll know that we'll be able to curtail some of the excesses of some of these defendants that try to play smart. For instance, we've seen so many.
I mean, would you consider that playing smart, or truly, if he has an underlying medical condition that he said has been there, these are complications arising from a treatment or a surgery he had 10 days a decade ago? I mean, could that be true?
I am not his doctor.
Exactly.
And I am not him in person. So I cannot say categorically, that what he's saying is wrong or he's lying. But we have seen different scenarios. People that come to court in stretches, people that come to court that say they can't move.
So should those be applied to his statement as well?
Well,
I mean, saying that one Nigerian has lied at a certain point in this, a case by the federal government, with the federal government, really, should that apply to every other Nigerian?
No, but something is very instructive in this guy's case now. The prosecutor told the court that the court should take note of the adjournments that have been happening at the instance of the defendant. That means there's been like this culture of finding a reason to ask for an adjournment at the end of the day, because a criminal trial cannot continue once the defendant is not in court.
And indeed, it says that the judge had actually asked them to investigate the
Investigate,
medical
yes,
certificate
yes.
and report back to the court. So
No
there are grey
worry,
areas. And let's
depending-
not forget on Organ's case as well. He didn't appear in court yesterday because of a toothache and high blood pressure. The
Yeah.
judge considered the high
So,
blood pressure.
I mean, continuum of the processes plus we should understand that, somebody who's accused is innocent until proven guilty.
Well,
Right?
that's why they've said they should bring him to court in a stretcher.
That is right. All right, let's move on to the next story from Premuim Times. Inconclusive elections. INEC announces dates for supplementary polls. Deveo, please take us through this.
Yes, this is the update from INEC on the position of the gubernatorial election. As we know, out of the, I think, 29 states that were up for election, 6 have been defined as inconclusive.
Yeah.
Now, reasons given, I'm trying to...
So discontinuation of the use of smart card readers, one of the
Yes.
factors affecting that, the failure to deploy them, overvoting, widespread disruption in polling units, and the margin of lead principle.
Now, everyone is meant to look at each and every of these, especially for those within the states that are affected, to see if these cases are real, because it's INEC, the umpire, that's calling them out on these cases. Now, also, that was the first instance in terms of electoral processes.
Yeah.
The second one that was major was where INEC said that in compliance with the margin of lead principle, and this is where a lot of people get confused. The lead margin was less than the counseled votes, and what that simply means is that the amounts that the winner had with the person who came in second place was less than that of what was counseled. And there are issues that surround that. One, why were there so many counseled votes? This issue needs to be looked at. Two, if you remember, the Rex counseled some votes that have been questioned.
Yes, the resident electoral
Yes,
commission.
where elections did take place. In some places they were counseled, in places where it was yet to be defined or determined whether there was a breakdown of law and order. They were counseled. I mean, there are a lot of questions that call into the politics of this. However, these elections will take place on the 23rd of March.
Yes.
So what we expect, INEC is also coming out with the constituencies that are affected, and the two major parties, that's the APC and the PDP, in most of those states will be going at it, and hopefully we'll get to a conclusive point. In the long run, this is not too good. It doesn't portend well where you have a lot of inconclusive elections. This should not be a trend. It's meant to be an exception and not a norm. INEC needs to look at this and give a very major review in their operations to ensure that we don't go on this path of inconclusive
elections. But it's a step in the right direction, seeing that some of the resident electoral commissions who've been found culpable have been handed over to security personnel. And also worthy of note is the fact that the commission has promised to make available details of the constituencies, including number of polling units and registered voters, on its website today.
All right, we have messages here. Shagun says if private investigators can go after these in quotes, sick accused VIP fraudsters, I'm sure they will find them enjoying private barbecues and house parties. And all right, then we have here from Yinka. Is it Uncle Lai that's promising those monies if we do the digital switch? However, moving forward, we need to move the courts to a close proximity to the hospitals, since they suddenly fall sick when they are charged to court. It's another innovation.
And that also still speaks to the companies that are supposed to effect that switchover. The Pinnacle company, who's been indicted alongside the individuals themselves.
Right, move on to our next story here. Adedunmade, I'll come to you for this one. Lagos goes tough on GOKADA, MAXOGADA operators. I'm sure many of us have seen these not fancy, but Okadas that have been carrying people, particularly in traffic. And now we are told that they've committed some traffic offences, and Lagos State is not smiling at all about this.
Yeah, one thing that caught my attention when I started reading the story was it begins by saying the Lagos State Task Force has impounded 115 motorcycles belonging to GOKADA. When I saw that, the first thing I thought of was if you take out 115 bikes from a person's fleet, then how many bikes do they have
Yeah.
in the first place? And they probably cost their business. But I read further that there are actually 23 bikes that were branded out of the 115 that were taken. Now, the Lagos State Traffic Law was passed in 2012 by Governor Fashola, and I remember then it was quite novel because Lagosians were known for traffic violations before he came. And what they said in that law, what the law provides, is that bikes below 200 cc's will not be allowed to ply certain roads,
Yes.
and will not even be allowed to move generally at all. Now, as it relates to this bike companies. Now, what I can see, according to the law, they are supposed to have a rider's card issued by the MVAA, that is the Motor Vehicle Administration Agency, and there are also smaller rules that they need to stick to. Like they always have to make sure they wear helmets. They have to make sure they don't carry more than one passenger, no pregnant woman or child below 12. And there's also the risk of going to prison for 3 years or community service if you breach any of these laws. Yeah, I would like to look at it from a government point of view, because I think that what they're trying to do is generate income and also provide safety. Because the two major points that were stated is that some of these people are riding without the required issued permits, which is the rider's card. And even when I read through the story, some of the people that were arrested stated that they didn't even know that they needed one in order to carry on their business.
Awareness, how well have the government done in regards to making sure the information is readily available to riders?
Well, I don't think they have done enough, because I think or this particular government has this attitude where you arrest before you tell them
They're
why.
very
Sometimes,
aggressive.
But they've been talking
arrest
about
people.
it for a long time, Adedunmade.
Well, they've been
especially
talking
the Lagos
about
State government
it,
have been very
but-
vocal in the past years.
But the thing is, it is a continuous process.
continuous.
You don't just do it for some time, then stop, then continue. Because these guys have been around for at least the past few months now. And we cannot put aside the fact that, one, they are very good at what they do, in the sense that they help people mitigate traffic.
Yes.
And also, it's a business plan that at least one is trying to make some money from.
But that's a small fraction. We're talking about the larger majority are Okada riders, major Okada riders. You see them applying one way, taking the wrong way route, and that poses a major problem to drivers on the road.
Yes,
now it's important to also mention. I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that not just the companies or the Okadas will be impounded or the motorcycles being impounded, but also the drivers,
even the
also be
passengers,
prosecuted, and the passengers.
The passengers
So we
as
have here
well.
that 10 arrested riders will be immediately charged to court for prosecution. So just to let people be aware, for those who are in the habit of flouting,
and
traffic
if you
rules.
would like to be aware, I just put out a tweet that explains the 2012 traffic law. So if you just go through that, you find that
Thank
quite
you very
interesting.
much for that one. Thanks a lot. Now, Deveo, tension in telecom sector. Telcos may review tariffs over double taxation. This is in the Vanguard newspaper, and just like Adedunmade mentioned earlier on with regards to ease of doing business in Nigeria, the challenges that businesses face, one of such is multiple taxation. Let's hear your thoughts, please.
Wow. Double taxation. That means double the charge on airtime. No. We're going to keep bringing those
My
air.
data is expensive. As
Yes,
it is.
we're going to be bringing the airtime down, not up. But they do raise some pertinent concerns here. The Association of Licensed Telecom Operators of Nigeria out and have said in a petition to government that they may be forced to review their charges because of the harsh environment that they've had to face in terms of the harmonization of regulations and taxes coming to them at various levels of government. Okay. Now this speaks to both the federal and the states
and local governments
and the local governments. Now, and this directly impedes on the return on investment. Just basically says it reduces their profits when they're always having to pay different taxes across board. Now, one of the ones that they pointed out was the demand notice that for the environmental impact assessment certification. They're aware that normally it comes from the Federal Ministry of Environment, but recently some states have been sending them the demand notice asking for payment on that behalf. Also, there have been requests of the Ecological Fund collections from state governments as well, which they've also known has been collected for the federal government. So they want a clarification as to who is actually meant to collect it, and all the multiple taxations that take place across board, starting from right of way, etc. Now, of course, we do know, just like especially Lagos, which has been known for the many taxes that business operators have to go through. Now, the operators are not only in Lagos, but this is nationwide. So in their petition to government, they've requested that government meet its objective under the ease of doing business, because the ease of doing business is a campaign to actually reform the operations and the regulatory environment for business operators within the country, both local and international. And if they get frustrated at the end of the day, they must take a position from a point of business, and we cannot afford an increase in our airtime.
Absolutely. Now, thank you very much for that. It's important to also note that if this affects big organizations like Telcos, how much more for small businesses who, which Nigeria has quite a number when it comes to SMEs.
We have messages in on WhatsApp. Olatunbosun said, Lagos State is on point on the motorcycle companies. Can any of these companies break traffic laws in a civilized climb without being punished? Getting set to find my daily bread, Jerry. And Bayo says, why isn't there a law that states that any medical practitioner that issues false medical report can be discredited and stripped of his license? Well, Chijoke from Lekki says, good morning. Lagos should focus more on the unlicensed and untrained Okada people that ruin lives daily. The brands that you called have introduced some sanity in the Okada transport section and should be encouraged to get better.
All right, moving on from that, we'll go on to our next story here, and I'll come to Adedunmade for this one. International Monetary Fund moves against early retirement of developing nations. They have warned developing nations to be wary of early retirement and attendant effect on the economy. Very quickly, Adedunmade, please take us through the story.
Yes, generally, they're looking at this from a government point of view. But we have been told that Nigeria may not really suffer most of the consequences.
Yes, the first world problems.
Well, before we used to use the direct benefit pension plan, which stated that at the end of your retirement, or at the point of your retirement, your employer will give you a lump sum. Right, but now we've moved to the contributory scheme where you and your employer contribute monthly to your pension, and at the end of the day, you take what is there. So I think this is taking a little bit of stress off the government and also off employers, particularly as it regards to this cry by the IMF. So now, but there are also some problems in Nigeria, even with regard to the fact that we've moved to the contributory scheme. We all know that we still have a huge problem with the payment of pensions, even on the state and federal levels, although the federal is doing a better job than most of the states, who of course are still complaining of lack of funds. Then of course in Nigeria we must understand that we have a larger youth population than our elderly, but we must also realize that that means that we're going to have a large population of elderly when the youth that we know now become old. So we need to prepare for that as well. Now there's been an argument for the increase in retirement age. For instance, teachers are saying that they should move theirs from 60 to 65. So if that is done across board, like, hey, our president is old enough, so
it should be increased. All right. Final story here very quickly. Deveo, I'll come to you. No controversial Boeing 737 MAX in Nigeria. Government clarifies. After obviously the crash with the Ethiopian Airlines, the number of social media posts have gone up. We received a number of forwarded messages. People want to check your flights to ensure that it's not one of the Boeing 737 MAX.
Yes.
What do you have to say about that?
Because of the history and how it took place in Malaysia or Indonesia, this is why this reaction has come globally. And the federal government has spoken through the Ministry of Aviation, that's Hadi Sarika, that there are none on the register within the country. So we are safe. However, it is known that there is a local operator that placed an order.
Yes.
And I think they've also made a statement that until they hear from the operators, that's Boeing, they will take a position. Well, some have said, when you're flying, please check that ticket and ensure that the plane is not a Boeing 37
Even
max.
before these things happened, I've always checked.
Yes.
Just to be sure I don't enter the wrong
You know,
plane
prevention.
before.
Oh, well done. Some people haven't
Prevention.
been that careful, but I believe that following this, I just hope it will not be short-lived, as with many other things that happen.
I know.
How many people still use their hand sanitizers?
I do.
Okay.
Not at the airport, though.
All right, well done.
Kudos from Cyril sent us a message. It said, I think our politicians should learn to play by the rules and save us from the cycle of inconclusive elections. I hear some people vilify INEC. How is INEC to blame when election participants refuse to be civilized? The incentive for holding political office is a key factor to be looked into to stem this tide of do or die politics. That's right. We've been talking about this, how to make political offices less attractive.
Pay less.
Thank you, Lagos, and thank you. Special thanks to our analysts who stepped in this morning to do justice to the stories. Deveo is at Deveo Okorie on Twitter. Adedunmade is at the same name at Adedunmade on Twitter.
Great.
Coming up
Lagos, at 8:15, we'll be back here for Locker Room 981 with Tay Guy. Lots of interesting things happening in the sporting world. So please stay tuned as we continue.